If you've been following my channel for the last couple months, you know that I have been working on a new Plex Media Server called Zeus. With cliche names aside, it has been a long project of mine that has taken some time to get perfected and get launched. In this final Zeus build video, I'm going to dive into more details about the build and explain some of the things that I did to make it the server that I desired. I'll cover the total cost and even further, talk more about some of the pros and cons of my decisions. Some of it might be a recap and this video might be a little long. For that, I apologize. To start off, I have to say that this build popped my cherry to the world of enterprise class hardware. I say this because even though I have a decent knowledge of computers in general, all of that came from consumer grade components. So while that did help me, this was still a good learning experience for me. So just keep that in mind before you judge me. All right, without further delay, meet Zeus. Housed inside a 4U Shinbro rack chassis, Zeus comes loaded with dual Xeon E5 2650 processors. These are the V1 Sandy Bridge CPUs clocked at 2 GHz, each supporting hyperthreading, giving Zeus a total of 16 cores and 32 threads. On Passmark.com, it pulls a whopping score of 15,217. To give you an idea of that kind of power, my X99 5960X has a score of 15,972. Backing this abundance of speed is 128 gigabytes of DDR3 ECC memory and a 1200 watt power supply. To serve the 24 hard drive bays in the front, it has 3 PCI Express LSI SAS cards, each controlling 8 bays with a transfer limit of 6 gigabits per second. For cooling, each CPU has its own heatsink with attached fans accompanied by kind of a rather crude solution to a noisy problem, but more on that later. The motherboard behind it all is a ZT Systems dual 2011 Sandy Bridge E socket with 16 slots for RAM running on American Megatrends BIOS. And even though I know who makes it along with the model and serial number, for the life of me, I cannot find any kind of support or upgrades for the BIOS, like anywhere. Moving on, for storage, it currently has 15 hard drives, 2 SSDs with an immediate plan to add a third SSD once UPS decides to show up. This includes 2 8TB Western Digital Red drives, 1 4TB Western Digital Black, 2 4TB WD Greens, and 10 4TB WD Red drives. It also has 2 SanDisk 480GB SSDs with another 160GB SSD just waiting to be installed. Excluding the SSDs, this gives me a total of 68 terabytes of raw storage installed on the server. However, 8 of that is going to be lost due to parity in the system. But still, 60 terabytes. The operating system of my choice to power it all is unRAID. This allowed me to maximize my hard drive space while giving me an easy way to expand the array anytime that I wanted to. This leads into my use of the 3 SSDs. One 480GB SSD is being used as a cache drive that allows me to move files to my server quickly without the bottleneck of the array. This has been an amazing experience because Zeus came with 2 10GB SFP ports, and most of my data is being dumped off of my main PC's SSD that is directly connected to the server in full 10 gigabit speeds via one of those ports. The other 480GB SSD is used solely as a side-mounted drive, hosting the Plex data and transcode folders. This gives me the best speeds in browsing and playing media files without taking up space on my cache drive. Finally, the last 160GB SSD will be used as a dedicated virtual machine disk. This will allow me to test and run multiple operating systems for a number of different reasons, most of which I don't actually know yet. But hey, it's there, or it will be. Soon. Circling back to the unRAID, so far I have installed a few key plugins and Dockers that I have found to be completely useful and simple to use. The first and most obvious being Plex Media Server. Aside from that though, I was easily able to install PlexPy to monitor users and content on my system. I also installed CrashPlan to make regular backups of my Plex data folder along with, a few other things. And then I even installed DuckDNS for an easy dynamic DNS solution. This is NetData, which gives me detailed readouts on everything involving with my system, and I also have ZoneMinder here as a placeholder for a future project. Now, I'll try not to bore you with every single thing I installed here. In fact, I covered a lot of this software in previous videos, but I do want to cover a few more plugins that really proved to be useful to me. The two most useful ones being the NerdPack and the Community Applications plugin. With NerdPack, you can easily install a ton of basic, however useful applications that will make your life easier. Even further, the Community Applications plugin will expand on this, giving you most of the same options, but also adding just about anything available for unRAID. And yes, these two do overlap just a little bit, but I still wanted to mention them both because the NerdPack seems to give you a lot of the necessities any server might need all in the one screen. Three of which I feel is very important to just about any server. The first being the pre-clear plugin. With this, you can easily pre-clear multiple drives without the use of SSH or any command line, an absolute requirement for anybody who prefers simple interfaces over the boring old white text and black backgrounds. And in case you don't know, pre-clearing a drive is where you write all zeros to a drive, so it's ready to be added to the array at any given moment. This also serves as a method to stress test the drive while looking for errors. I, in fact, found out a couple of my drives had errors on them, and I was able to send them off for warranty exchanges with Western Digital before I added them to my pool. Gotta love warranty. The second plugin I love is ransomware protection. With this, you can add bait files to each of your shares that has variations in name, size, and extension, the purpose of which is to wait for those files to be altered in any way and in reaction, lock down your server to avoid further infection. It can automatically set your shares to read only, stop the array, or run a custom script, all of which claims to be done within a tenth of a second. For obvious reasons, this is an amazing concept to protect your data from anybody on your network who might download and run the wrong file. Sure, you can lock down your shares with username and passwords, but that's not going to stop ransomware from infecting machines that are already authorized to access that data. My third favorite plugin is called Dynamix Cache Directories. This is because unRAID likes to spin down drives when not being used to save power and wear. However, the flaw to this is that when you want to browse your folders, you're going to end up waiting for each drive to spin up as you navigate through your directories, just to see what's inside. And believe me, this can be a little aggravating. With cache directories, all of that is stored into memory and immediately accessible without needing to spin up any drives, which is amazing. But hey, y'all are here to find out what this server can do in relation to Plex, so let's move on. For testing, I used an 11 megabit 1080p movie file with surround sound audio hosted on my server's cache drive to avoid any bottleneck or limitations with hard drives. Then I played that file on the Plex.tv web interface on my main PC, transcoded down to 2 megabits in multiple windows until I had issues, which as it turns out meant that I could have a total of 11 transcoded streams at the same time without much slowdown or buffering. I was able to get 12 streams to play, but it did cause some buffering on startup with my other streams. Hell, I even tried to do 13 streams, but not happening. So in comparison to my old server running an i7-3770 that could do a solid 7 streams, I gained 4 additional streams that I will probably never use. But hey, go big or go home, or something. Now, of course, Zeus is going to be able to do so much more for me than just be a Plex Media Server. Even though that's its primary function, I plan on exploring many other options as I go along. For example, a security camera DVR and a cloud backup device for the many computers that I deal with. And just in case you missed some of my previous videos covering the build process, I'll link to them in the cards above and the description below. But now I want to take a quick overview of the cooling that I did because it was a big hurdle for me, and well, honestly, I'm just completely satisfied with my results. When I got the new server, the included fans were just absolutely terribly crazily, ridiculously loud. This was because they were designed to be in a server room where sound just was not an issue. Welcome to my journey of ignorance. Step this way, and I'll show you around. So this was a problem that had to be solved. I tried reducing the voltage to the fans, but even at low RPMs, it was just unbearable. Plus, it reduced a much needed amount of airflow to the passive coolers on the CPUs and the SAS cards. With my previous experience using the amazing Noctua fans in my main computer, I set out to create a custom fan bracket to replace the smaller 80mm fans with three 140mm fans. Some minor issues arose from the lack of PWM controls that forced me to run them at full throttle all the time, more on that in previous videos. However, I liked the idea of them running at full speed because I wasn't just cooling the CPUs. I had to think about the hard drives and the SAS controllers as well. This worked great. It kept my drives cool even when they were under full load, and even kept me from almost burning my fingers when I touched the SAS heat sinks. And as an added bonus, the Noctua fans at full speeds were even quieter than my old server. However, the processors failed my stress test and they started going over 70 degrees Celsius under load. Because of this, I opted into buying a new set of CPU coolers that had fans directly attached to them, bringing my full loaded CPU temps down to around 52 to 55 C. Perfect. For performance, the dual Xeons were able to hit 1378 in Cinebench, only a few hundred points away from my 5960X. See, where it lacks in core speed, it makes up for in threads, and Plex is pretty good at handling multiple cores. For storage, well, this is kind of a pro and con thing for me. In choosing unRAID as my OS, I knew that going in I would lose the regular speed of ZFS and RAID file systems, because with those file systems, they use the combined speed of all the disk in the array. With unRAID, it uses one or two parity drives that need to be calculated and have parity written to anytime you move files to your server. However, it only uses that drive that you're writing to and the parity drive. So it basically has to write data to two separate drives with the handicap of having to calculate parity on the primary. The end result is having a write speed of around 33 to 35 megabytes per second, and read speeds are pretty much limited by the individual drive speed I'm reading from. This, of course, is where the cache drive comes in to save the day. What it does is allow me to dump data at much faster speeds at the capacity of the network or the single drive. I love this because I have two SSDs connected with the 10G SFP port, so things are super quick. Then automatically every night at 3 a.m. it moves those files to the array, making room for the next day. And yes, if your cache drive fails during this move, you will lose the data stored on the cache drive. However, you can have dual cache drives in RAID 1 to avoid this issue. The good thing here is that with the unRAID, you can stop the array and add new drives to it, expanding your storage without any hassle. I love that, and it was pretty much the selling point for me. I won't dive more into the risk of losing data with this kind of setup, and it is possible with multiple drives failing on a rebuild, but I can say that this is a much better solution than I had on my old server, which was basically a bunch of drives with no RAID or parity or any protection at all. It was a little scary. But I never had a drive fail, although I did find out that I had a couple that were on their way out. My only wish is that I could have more than one array at the same time, so I'm not throwing all of my eggs into one basket. It's not really that big of a deal, and I'm not even sure if I would use it right now, but in the future, that might be a feature that I want. Really though, at this point, that about sums up my dislikes with unRAID. Other minor issues can be solved with plugins or Dockers fairly easily. As an example, using the unassigned devices as a separate mounted SSD for Plex data and transcoding folders requires the unassigned devices plugin. Without it, you have to use your cache drive if you want that speed. So installing unRAID is dead simple, Dockers and plugins are really easy, setting up arrays are pretty much self-explanatory, and everything just kind of works as intended without having to jump on Google every 5 minutes to figure something out. Overall, I'm really starting to love this software. Of course, it does cost money, like $130 for the Pro license that I needed, but within the 30-day trial period that they gave me, I came to really enjoy using the software, and it seemed worth the money. And that kind of brings me to the cost of Zeus as a whole, a final number, the end value. For the server itself, I jumped on eBay and got in contact with a seller that was willing to custom build it to fit my needs. I will link to that auction in the description below, but the price ended up being $653 after shipping. Then I purchased some new Noctua Fans, CPU coolers, a SATA power splitter, an SFP to RJ45 adapter, 2 SSDs, and a Lexar USB jump drive that was needed for the unRAID OS. This all cost me right around $540, bringing my grand total to $1,193, give or take some change. But hey, now I have a server that can handle anything I can throw at it Plex related without even breaking a sweat. And I have a large amount of extra RAM and extra cores that I can use to play around with some VMs or plugins without slowing it down very much. Basically, I'm good for like 2 or 3 years. Yeah. So I would like to hear from you in the comments below as for some ideas for utilizing the extra horsepower this server has to offer. Would you run specific VMs for something, maybe plugins or Dockers? Let me know. Whatever it might be, I'm up for good ideas and I love exploring new things, so fire away. I've already taken a few ideas and tips from my viewers to get where I am now, and I thank you all for the help and interaction. Thank you for following me on this new server journey of mine. I hope some of you got a little inspired or maybe even possibly learned something new. I know that I did, and to me that is actually a lot of fun. I still have much to learn though, and I know that there are probably better or easier ways to do some of the things that I did, but I look at it this way. You have to start somewhere. Anyways, as always, like and subscribe below, and have a great day.